enjoyable and relevant, and we want to showcase these tools and strategies that are used in competitive debates so that you can walk away, feeling more confident in your ability to argue and persuade others. So again, we're not trying to change your opinion on any given topic. We just want to give you the tools that make you open to change when you're having conversations with your family and friends, colleagues, Facebook enemies, whatever. New to the program, typically what we do is we have a little lesson about one facet of debate that you can start implementing, but it kind of took away from the time that we had for the debaters to actually talk about the topic, and this is a pretty loaded one, so I printed out 2 sheets for you guys. This is the debater prep document that we give to our debaters at the very beginning of the month to help them start building and forming their argument. As you'll see, there's some great tips in there. This was actually constructed by our instructor who's going to be teaching our workshop on November 8th. He made this little debate prep document to help you start coming up with ways to form your argument, ways to just enhance it, make it better, make it cohesive, and points about delivery that are important in keeping your audience captivated and on track. So feel free to browse through those. If you have any questions, obviously let me know. And speaking of, if you look at the very bottom of those worksheets, you'll see a discount code for $5 off our masterclass. So this is going to be this is new for us. We're going to be doing a masterclass on the fundamentals of debate and our application towards everyday life. It's going to be hosted at 300 Park, WeWork 300 Park, which is only 5 blocks away from here. We only have 5 spots left for November, so if you want to come, you got to fill up quickly. And if you guys fill out that feedback form and give it back to me, I'll give you a discount code for $10 off. And that's for any masterclass for the end of 2017. We just added a new one for December 7th. So again, we have a workshop on the 8th of November and the 7th of December, all on the fundamentals of debate. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we hope you guys will be there. All right, so without further ado, let's get into this thing. The topic this evening, the motion is artificial intelligence poses a serious threat to the future of human existence. Very apocalyptic, very sexy in the world of debate. We're excited to talk about it. We have a phenomenal panel lined up for you guys. So I'm sure you're all aware that these little boxes in our pockets are, examples of how much technology has advanced over the last few years. There's a term that futurists call singularity, which is when intelligence of machines will exceed that of humans. And that's a pretty big point of contention, whether or not that point of singularity is going to, destroy the Earth, or it's going to be benevolent in our interests. We see a lot of examples in media today with the Blade Runner 2049. I don't know if anybody saw that, but the cyborgs that are coming, and Westworld, iRobot. And as of April 2017, according to Wired Magazine, there is zero evidence that superintelligence is on the horizon, but should we still be preparing ourselves for the possibility of hostile takeover of AI? So really exciting. I'm pumped to get into this, and let me introduce our debaters for this evening. First up, arguing for the motion, he is an anchor for Complex Hustle, which is a media channel dedicated to today's do-it-yourself generation about business, technology, and entrepreneurship. He produces videos designed to get people registered to vote, and he spent years as a technology blogger for the Huffington Post. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Hanley. And our next 2 debaters arguing against the motion were actually teammates in one of our previous live debates discussing religion's effect on society, so some of you may recognize. First up, he has production and operational experience in corporate news, entertainment, and several fintech startups. He is also, like me, a huge Rick and Morty fan. Ladies and gentlemen, Iain Coston. Come on up. Also arguing against the motion, he is a constitutional law researcher and a freelance editorialist. He has written for Forbes, The Daily Caller, The Federalist, and several other outlets. He is the author of, I should have asked you this before I did it, but Khalafism as Salafism, a monograph on Salafi Islam, and is currently writing a full-length book on legal theory. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Grass. Did I? Wow, not expecting that. Our final debater is a high school senior at Martin Luther King Jr. High School for Law, Advocacy, and Community Justice. He has an extensive background in public speaking through his school's debate team, an internship with civil rights law firm Latino Justice, and his collaboration with DoSomething.org, which sponsored his initiatives at the UN's Youth Leadership Program. Did I mention he's in high school? Ladies and gentlemen, Joel Dela Cruz. Joel, come on up here. So before we get started, I introduced Joel last because we need your help. Joel is currently in the running to receive 1 of 10 full merit-based scholarships from the Posse Foundation so that he can double major in finance and political science at Vanderbilt University. There's a lot at stake for this ambitious young man, so I'm going to give him a few minutes to explain a little bit more detail of what he's working on.
Thank you. Well, as you know, Evan mentioned, I'm a senior in high school, so right now it's kind of the crunch time. I gotta get college recommendations and all that from my teachers, and I'm working on that. But I am trying to get a full ride scholarship to Vanderbilt University through the Posse Foundation. The Posse Foundation is a special organization that gives full ride merit-based scholarships to leading individuals that they think can succeed in that environment. And they're different from other organizations because they want people to go in there with a support system. They send people in these cohorts, or as they call them, posses, groups of 10 to university every year. So at any given moment, there are 40 posse, scholars at their partner universities, and I'm aiming for Vanderbilt. So if anybody knows anybody at the Posse Foundation, tell them about me. Tell them why you think I should be given a chance to go to the, to go to Vanderbilt. I'm currently waiting to hear if I'm accepted into the final interview, because there's 3 interviews. I did my second one at the beginning of October, and I hear if I'm accepted to the last one, in 2 weeks. So yeah, it's kind of like a stressful time right now. And the reason why I really do think I'll succeed with Posse is because of their special kind of cohort mentality, while they send people with a support system, and also the fact that their premise that when you look at the SAT and you only look at the SAT, you miss so much of a person. As Evan mentioned, I spoke at the UN. I work with Latino Justice, which is a civil rights law firm. I interned at the Appellate Court. I did all of that, but you don't know about that when you just look at my SAT score. So, yeah. Thank you.
Do not let your desire to help Joel sway your final vote. That has nothing to do with the debate tonight. You can be just as ruthless with him as anybody else. Thank you, Joel. And again, if anybody knows anybody at the Posse Foundation or knows somebody who knows somebody, please, you can get my information or his information. We really want to get him that scholarship. So let's do this. All right, so just a quick rundown of how this debate's going to go. Each debater is going to come up here, give a 5-minute introduction speech. We'll then have a 30-minute crossfire where I will ask them questions, and we'll take questions from the audience. And then we will finish with a 3-minute closing speech from each debater. So coming up first is going to be Brian, correct? Ladies and gentlemen, Brian.
Hi everyone. So I just want to start by saying that this position that I'm representing tonight isn't one that was assigned by any means. In fact, I think I was the first person to volunteer for the event. So I had my choice of which side of the argument I want to represent, and I chose this one because I believe it wholeheartedly. This is a position I represent with my friends on a daily basis. And I also want to start by saying that I do think there's sort of an emotional problem here when it comes to artificial intelligence, and a psychological issue when it comes to understanding how big of a threat it is. So if I were up here talking about nuclear war or something even like climate change, I think a lot of you would leave here feeling very threatened, right? But when it comes to something that's been sensationalized like science fiction for so long, death by artificial intelligence is something that a lot of us I actually think is something that's cool or something that's interesting, and we don't recognize the real threat that's here. But if you talk to anybody who's anybody in the field of artificial intelligence, they're going to tell you unequivocally that AI doesn't just pose one serious threat to our future existence. In fact, it poses threats right now, but it poses a whole slew of threats, most of which we can't even imagine yet, because we're talking about intelligence that's so far beyond our current position. If you ask Elon Musk, who's the founder of Tesla and SpaceX and one of the leading minds in AI right now, he'll tell you that our reckless exploration of artificial intelligence is akin to, quote, summoning the devil, summoning the demon, actually. And Musk has gone on to say that artificial intelligence actually represents a greater threat than nuclear war. And when Vladimir Putin of Russia recently stated that artificial intelligence is, whoever leads the world in artificial intelligence is going to be, quote, the ruler of the world, Elon Musk tweeted in response and said, guys, we have to wake up. This is serious stuff we're talking about, and this is probably going to be the most likely cause of World War II. So this isn't just Elon Musk who's concerned. Stephen Hawkins, widely regarded as one of the greatest minds of our time, has said that if we were to disregard the serious threat of artificial intelligence, that could be, quote, our greatest mistake ever. Hawkins has gone on also to say that artificial intelligence could, quote, spell the end of the human race. So we have Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, we also have Bill Gates right now, Warren Buffett, minds like those touring the country telling people artificial intelligence is serious, we need to wake up. In fact, these people are freaked out that more people aren't concerned, and I think a lot of that goes back to this idea that we really can't marshal an adequate emotional response when it comes to AI. But if you talk to somebody in the AI community, people experts who are studying this on a daily basis, they're going to tell you that, very much like people in the scientific community will tell you in regards to climate change, that there is, the jury isn't out anymore. This is settled science. People in the scientific community will tell you climate change is a serious threat, and people in the AI community will tell you that AI is a serious threat. Now we have to talk about why. So what is AI? AI is software that can write itself. Starts with programmers coding it, but then this code can take on a mind of its own. It can actually develop functionality that wasn't initially designed by the programmers. So this is a system, a computer system, that's not only learning, but it's teaching itself how to learn. It's teaching itself how to learn better, how to learn faster. And there's so many reasons that I'll get into later why artificial intelligence, and especially artificial general intelligence, can so far outpace the human mind. But first, I want to talk about some of the actual biggest threats. The biggest threat that artificial intelligence poses is in regards to jobs. So a study recently came out of Oxford University, a similar study came out of Harvard University. They both found that in the next 20 years, AI is predicted to kill 50% of jobs in the United States. 50%. It's more than 150 million jobs. So I honestly think I could really just dwell on that fact this entire night. 150 million jobs plus are going to be replaced by automation in the next 20 years. It's just a few presidential terms. And you might say, a lot of people in this room might say, well, hey, good thing I went to college, good thing I went to grad school, good thing I wasn't a truck driver or a cashier, because those are the only jobs that are going to go, right? The reality is, we're talking about MOOCs, massive open online courses, killing jobs in education. We're talking about online tax software, killing accountants like PwC and KPMG, Ernst & Young. We're talking about lawyers losing their jobs to software. We're talking about studies showing that 80% of what doctors do today is going to be automated in the next few decades. So no person's job is safe. But you might say, well, hey, maybe my job isn't this, but at least I'll be retrained. I'll find more creative duties, right? I won't do that remedial manual labor anymore. It'll be more intellectual stuff, right? So we're going to have to retrain people, which is going to take time. It's going to take money for people to go back to school. We don't have the political or the economic systems in place to absorb that type of shock. It's going to happen overnight. When we have gridlock in Washington, if we can't even raise the minimum wage in most states, how are we ever going to introduce something like a universal basic income when most people in this country aren't working? So we're going to lose jobs. We're also going to see wealth and income inequality exacerbate. When you have a situation where robots can do more work, and you can have companies like Amazon and CEOs like Jeff Bezos run a company with robots in their factories, autonomous cars and truck drivers on the road, drones delivering packages, you don't need people anymore. So the question is, what do we do? How do we make a living? How do we provide for our families? What do we do with our free time? And what's the point of the human existence if we don't do anything anymore? The idea... Time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great speech. I like his hair. His hair is really fine tonight. All right, so we're going to dive right into some framework. I know that's some really technical stuff that seems kind of annoying, but it's really important to have a guiding post for how can we actually view this debate. What is actually AI? What does a serious threat actually mean? So we, as an opposition, actually do agree that we think that it's very fair to talk about artificial intelligence as essentially technology that can replace jobs in a lot of human functions. I think that's really fair, and I think the threat of jobs is a really good focal point to what does it actually mean to be a threat to human existence. So as we agree on the definition of AI, what does serious threat to human existence mean? It's basically human function made irrelevant. Is that actually going to happen? So the end of round question, I guess you can ask yourself to decide, okay, who's won and lost, is does AI seriously threaten the future potential of humans to be able to have quality of lives, to actually have a real existence? to be able to live out as we do, with jobs, with work, this meaning of life, big meaning of life questions. Can we continue that, and is AI actually going to put an end to that? I think that's a very fair discussion for us to have for the rest of the round. So remember, when we ask questions, when we get answers, all that kind of stuff, that's how the debate is going to be framed. Are we just going to lose our jobs, and is our life going to be meaningless? And so what we are going to prove actually is that not the case, that actually, when we look to human history, when we look at historical stuff, when we look at economics, all of these really kind of boring things actually point us to these really good technological benefits, specifically AI, actually enables humans to be able to live out their actual more pure desires. Actually enables them to do what they really want, what they can really want to do with AI, taking care of the kind of boring stuff. So we'll actually go in to see that with AI actually taking care of the stuff that we don't really want to do, we can do things that are more enjoyable. So we're going to have two main points. The first one is that artificial intelligence actually promotes equality between citizens. Secondly, that artificial intelligence allows the marginalized to have an increased quality of life. Okay, so we're again focusing heavily on this quality of life. Are people's lives actually going to be improved with artificial intelligence rapidly destroyed? And again, the main point that Brian talked about is jobs. Are jobs actually a threat? Are people just not going to have work? Are we just going to have a bunch of, are people going to be homeless? And that's a serious problem because of artificial intelligence. However, when we look to economic history, we have made huge leaps and bounds in technology. So that goes into our first point about artificial intelligence actually promoting equality. When we look at something simply like the telephone, right? Usually, white privileged people, specifically in America, only they ever had any access to telephones. Now urban people in America and again around the globe are able to Google employment ratios, because of the way technology has advanced with things like Siri. People around the world actually have access to a lot of information that actually closes that information gap that people weren't able to have 50 years ago. Alex is going to go into this a lot, but just to set up the principle for the rest of this round of what this actually looks like is people, poor people in Mumbai can actually have access to this information that rich people didn't even have 50, 60 years ago. So that's just little clues, little speckles of cool information that people actually get to have that can improve quality of life now. But going to the second point, specifically about how artificial intelligence, with jobs and with this increase of information, actually allows the marginalized and those poor people to actually have an increased quality of life. So we're going to talk about efficient systems and blue-collar workers specifically. So within these efficient systems, those who are with an increased efficiency of AI, with more economic prosperity, this allows people to have more disposable income. Allows people to work more and get more than to have more disposable income. So those who are well off can actually give more to the marginalized, just specifically talking about them. But also there's an increase in non-essential jobs. Whether you like them or not, there are not a lot of Michael Bays in North Korea. There are not a lot of Michael Bays in a lot of poor regions. But the reason why we're able to have Michael Bay, whether you like him or not, he's able to do more artistry things and make millions and millions of dollars because he doesn't have to do any of the other stuff that technological advances have made irrelevant. So, whether it's dancers or palm readers, people in more prosperous societies are able to do jobs that they find greater satisfaction. They're able to entertain people instead of having to work at the boring stuff that technological advances are able to take care of. So now we look to, again, the technological advances that AI are able to take care of. We look to a sales and marketing job, for instance. This is actually happening right now. AI is actually able to do a lot of finding customers that salespeople used to have to do. Now they don't have to do it anymore. Now they can focus on interpersonal relationships to be able to make their systems more efficient and give out products. Now again, that's a very general, a very principled view, but when we look to actual economic history, because of technological advances, specifically like AI, actually gives more opportunities to those who need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Joel Dela Cruz, and I'm here speaking for Bro. Now, I'm going to start off by listing off my contentions, my points, and then I will come back and go and explain them in detail. One, Some robots are more equal than others. 2, revolutionizing the arms race. 3, real threat, real problem. 1, some robots are more equal than others. Now, what does this mean? Now, we've talked about how the AI system is something completely different than we have anything done before. This can't be compared to any new technologies that we've had in the past. We can't compare this to the telephone or to the airplane. This changes our world in a completely different manner that we have never seen before. Some of us can't even think about to the extent that this will change our lives. We can look at things like the Internet of Things, warfare, travel, transportation. This literally changes everything. And by the statement, I mean some robots are more equal than others, is that we are creating machines that will be more, that in a sense will be more intelligent than us. And what happens when we create a being, or whatever you want to call it, a robot that can think better than us? And in some places we've already done that, you know. There are games like chess and other things that robots have been able to beat people, and we've been able to see examples of AI, you know, taking the world by storm, take the AI system, and you know, other examples of how AI has been taking jobs. And we've been talking about this for a while now. And I'd like to go on into the arms race, because you know, my colleague has stressed the importance of how this, how this will take jobs, and I wanted to touch into the arms race. And that the simple fact is that being 6 months ahead in research, in the development of this field, can mean the difference between do or die. Lots of people, as my colleague had mentioned, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, you know, this is a serious problem that affects serious that can damage us in a serious manner. And examples of this is laws and LAR, which are, give me a second to find the abbreviation, lethal autonomous weapons and lethal autonomous robotic weapons. And that this changes the game. You know, we used to talk about how drones would be sent off to the Middle East, and that this, you know, we would use drones and missile attacks to attack terrorists and other groups. But then when we implement this lethal autonomous weapons, they won't need a person operating. We can just set targets, and then imagine how crazy that is. That we can set a robot to program to go find the target and go kill that target. That is obscure, and you know, that has to be some kind of breaking some kind of international laws and moral laws. Not even getting to the ethical and thinking of that. And I'd like to go on into 3, real problem and real threat. And I've mentioned this earlier, that the Internet of Things. And what is the Internet of Things? The Internet of Things is the idea that everything, our chairs, our fridges, every aspect of our lives will have the internet implemented into it, in a sense, making it smart. We had smartphones, we have smart cars, we will have smart everything. And that once this happens, everything will be digitized. And that just opens threat for cyber attacks and other ways of us being harmed, new ways for being harmed. People like to talk about terrorist attacks where terrorists would take trucks and then drive into crowds in Europe. But then we can now have a hacker hack into the new Google self-driving car and potentially crash into pedestrians and then kill countless people. And again, nuclear threat, this is the new nuclear threat. The world won't end because of North Korea. It's going to end because someone hacked into a system and opened dams. And we have to remember that AI can be weaponized. It is a self-learning system and potentially could be used to be sent out into a foreign internet site and then eventually kind of learn, in a sense, to gather information to the point where it's able to hack government websites and then hack dam systems, hack defense systems, and hack all sorts of things. An example is, a tactic that North Korea does to South Korea is that they would use these kind of fake missile attacks, where South Korea would get these alerts saying, "Oh, North Korea has sent missiles." they're launching missiles into South Korea, and then this would cause South Korea's response.
I'm sorry, I can't speak too high.
Thank you. Minutes, wow, that's a lot. Excellent. Look at Joel. You're so young and you're up here debating. I think of what Julius Caesar said about Alexander the Great. He was speaking to a compatriot of his. Do you think I have not just cause to weep when I consider that Alexander at my age had conquered so many nations and I have done nothing that is memorable? Am I saying that we're lords of state? Yeah, maybe I'm saying that. I don't know. A woman sits in a hospital in Japan. She is desperate. She is panicked. She is, in a way, fighting for her life. She has no clue what's going to come. The doctor comes into her and says, we have... The doctor comes in to run your sickness through the IBM Watson program. This woman had been to see every single excellent doctor in all of Japan, and they could not diagnose her. They said that she had leukemia. IBM's algorithmic program, Watson, found otherwise, and she was able to find a cure. Now, what we're talking about in terms of technological development is we're talking about moving leagues forward medicinally, technologically, societally, in terms of improving people's lives. We're not talking about a Terminator 2 vision where drones come on like so many specters in the sky, murdering everybody, right? And by the way, if you're taking your cues from Terminator 2, a script written by James Cameron, you would probably be on this debate. The other problem, in terms of the doomsday for all of this, is that neurobiologically, what would have to be achieved in order for computer programs to replicate what the human mind can do is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you're talking about billions of synapses firing off in your mind at all times. Until recently, I know neuroscience is all the rage, but until recently, it wasn't even known whether or not neurotransmitters going from affective to the receptive transmitter were purely electrical or chemical. You're talking about a process in the mind that's not even known. And just to be clear, the singularity that everybody talks about at this point, where technology comes to be so absolute that AI overtakes every capability that humanity has, it would have to replicate every part of the human mind. And this is beyond our current reckoning. Now, economically, we're talking about the displacement of jobs. It's interesting because Deloitte Consultancy sort of tracked technological progress, and this was what Brian was talking about is a similar refrain. I mean, you know, some 2 centuries ago, the Luddites talked about this. Our jobs are going to be displaced. Net gain in jobs, because the issue with the economy is that it's not a finite pie, right? You don't cut your slice and then that's it. And you can see this in America versus the third world. It expands and expands and it expands, right? What is the reason that social media constitutes billions of dollars in terms of GDP? What is the reason that the American internet constitutes 6% of the worldwide economy, growing exponentially? It's because people, once they have money, are able to spend it in the most frivolous manner. And not to be cheeky about it, but what is the reason why people who do... Is anyone here familiar with Reiki crystal? I'm on this lately because a friend of my wife she basically waves a crystal over her friends, gets paid $20 a pop, and that's how she makes her living, right? This is a luxury of the first world. So it's not exist as if the pie ends. But what does end, and I'll tell you this, if you limit the potentialities of artificial intelligence, you limit agricultural output in the third world. You limit alleviating hunger. You limit a better life for people not here, but out there in India and China.
I just want to live inside your head, Alex, for like a day and see what's going on up there. Is this your pen? All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we've heard from our opening remarks. We're going to move into the cross-fire section of the debate where I will ask the debaters questions and we will open it up to the audience as well. I want to direct my first question to the against side. There was an interesting point, Joel's point about the arms race, and I kind of want to go back to this idea of what a serious threat is defined as. And if we have this identifying problems and then doing whatever it takes to complete their objective, whether it's putting people in harm or whatever, that causes a serious problem in my mind. And is there something that we should be doing proactively? I mean, is this a legislative thing? Is this a scientific thing? What kind of regulations need to be in place to avoid this serious threat, or does it even need to happen at all?
So it's interesting that the things that make human beings the worst, right, our evolutionarily embedded traits, are the things that are rendered completely unproblematic for artificial intelligence, or at least nominally. So, in your mind, you're a human being, and someone says something to you that's deeply offensive, right? One of the things that's embedded right in here, in your frontal cortex and in your cerebellum, it's the idea to be rageful. All of a sudden, someone says something, if you want to contextualize this or speaking topically, you can talk about Charlottesville. Why on earth would people go out on the street when they have a job to do the next day? It's because their brain, their primitive brain, the reptilian brain, as so many evolutionary thinkers have termed it, puts them out there to do it. There's nothing about artificial intelligence that programmatically includes these sorts of defects, right? So in terms of cabining the most destructive potentialities of artificial intelligence, you can look at what's been done in the past. In the 1980s, there were certain DNA enzymes that were discovered, right? And everyone was, I don't know if anyone knows about this, but everyone was freaking out. The idea that, oh my goodness, we know how to manipulate DNA. We're going to be able to unleash these massive diseases. It's going to be disastrous, right? And what ended up happening was a mutually agreed to convention, not even governmentally sanctioned, but between scientists about how to handle DNA. And thus far, I know of no disastrous man-made Ebola-like outbreak that's occurred. So the answer is that we can handle it.
Okay. Ian, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I mean, you can obviously regulate certain things, right? Like as far as there is a potential, if that potential actually exists to be, to be able to regulate it. I think that can be done, but that doesn't mean that artificial intelligence is inherently bad. It just means we need to use it in the right way, right? Like nuclear weapons, like I would much rather, we shouldn't just, as far as the United States and other people, we shouldn't just get rid of our nuclear weapons just so other people have it, right? Like they can be used for good. We see it with, like we talked about, the sales and marketing. It, by its inherent nature, can do things that that we want to do, so we can control and do things that we don't want to do. So I think yes, we can regulate, but that doesn't mean that it poses a serious threat. We just need to mold it to how we want it to be.
So I would say a few things. First is that I find it interesting that, in defending what I personally genuinely believe is an indefensible side of the motion, I find it interesting that Alex was able to argue both that AI won't ever be capable of reaching human level of intelligence, but it will, however, be able to cure cancer. So I find that to be an interesting contradiction. The first part I want to touch on is why it's not only extremely possible, but it's actually inevitable that AI is not going to reach human level intelligence, it's going to exceed it.
Because one isn't the cure and the other is
Wait, let's let him finish. Listen.
Sure, so just to define kind of what AI is and what we're talking about, a lot of the AI we refer to today is soft AI. So you're probably right that soft AI couldn't exceed where humans are. Weak AI couldn't exceed where we are right now. Weak AI is what we talk about when we talk about 1996, the first chess-playing robot to beat the best chess-playing human. And back last year in 2016, the best Go-playing Go is another really advanced board game. The best Go-playing robot finally beat the best Go-playing human. So that's what we refer to as weak AI. And that's where AI is exceedingly good at one specific task, but it doesn't have cross-domain tasks. But when we're talking about AI, we're also talking about artificial general intelligence. So this is an AI that can think across domains, and its ability to think across domains actually compounds all that knowledge. So these are robots that can do everything better than us. There are a few reasons I want to just point out that this is an inevitable direction. So we like to think that humans are special because we're the top of the food chain, and we have these fast-working brains, right? But the human brain has certain limitations. For one, we have a size limitation. You have to be able to fit the brain in a human cranium. When it comes to computer systems, we have no size limitations. We can build computers the size of warehouses or the size of stadiums. We also have a biochemical limitation. Biochemical circuits process information millions of times slower than electric circuits. So if you have electronic circuits, let's just assume this computer isn't even any smarter than humans, it's literally going to be 1 million times faster by nature. So we could take the smartest human being, Albert Einstein, put that person on a task like to solve cancer, for instance, and give them 20,000 years. Because a robot is moving 1 million times faster, even if it's no smarter than Einstein, that robot is going to be able to do 20,000 years worth of work in just 1 week. So that's like this moderator Evan asking a question and us all having a year to think about how we want to respond. That's the type of leg up we're talking about. It's really inconceivable because the type of AI we're familiar with right now, the soft AI, it's just not there yet. But all we have to assume to get there is that we're going to keep making advancements in terms of hardware and software design. And I find it very hard-pressed to argue that we won't continue to make advancements. If we don't continue to make advancements, how will we not reach a superhuman intelligence? I'd like to ask my opponents.
Allow me to pivot here. Speaking of advancements, we'll get back to it. I know, it's so tough. So let's discuss the issue that Iain brought up in terms of allowing the marginalized to have better quality of life, increases in non-essential jobs, the advent of new occupations that we haven't even heard of yet. The idea that AI can benefit the marginalized. Could you guys repeat that?
Yeah. So, like I talked about before. So let me reply to this with some statistics. Amazon, we all know Amazon, it's where everybody buys things. Before we had Amazon, what did we have? We had super big retail stores like Target, Walmart, all these other stores. But now Amazon is killing the market. They're going to be there soon. These old competitors won't survive any longer. And how many people does Amazon employ? About 300,000. That sounds like a lot, but when we look at Walmart, they employ 2 million people. And when we destroy one market and replace it with this new one that's making just as much money, maybe even more money, isn't really spreading the wealth. That isn't really helping their argument that poor people will benefit from this.
And yeah, just to add one more thing. So also, if you look at the trends where technology is advanced, so too has economic inequality. Why, I would ask my opponents, why, if you argue that this new breakthrough in technology is going to make life more equal, why have we seen as technology has gotten more ubiquitous and more accessible, why has there been a massive concentration of wealth at the top? Right now in this country, we have the top 1% that's in control of virtually twice as much wealth as the bottom 90% combined. We're talking about serious record-shattering inequality. And this is all mapped to technological sophistication. I mean, when major corporations can do more without their workers doing the work, and they can profit, why would they ever give that money back to the workers? How is that making life more equal?
Right, I think those are both really important questions that need to be answered. And I think two ways. First of all, if you look to, there's a really fancy number called employment population ratio. Essentially what that does is how much of certain people groups are actually having jobs. Since if you look back to since they started collecting data, that recently, once we actually started protecting the rights of minorities, that again, specifically in America, we've had Amazon, right? Crush and eliminate millions and millions of jobs. Then the massive amount of data is saying that these people are still keeping jobs somehow. That as far as people keeping jobs, Amazon destroying jobs, that kind of stuff. We're not arguing that jobs are being destroyed, that jobs aren't being destroyed. We think millions of jobs are actually being destroyed. But it's the same reason why you don't see a lot of horse carriage drivers out there, because of the car. You don't see switchboard operators, connecting calls because, we don't see those. We don't say, oh, well, America's, or Western world is destroyed because all these millions of jobs are being destroyed. So I think the principle is faulty that because certain specific jobs are lost, therefore the people occupying those jobs can't find work elsewhere. So that's a premise that I think is kind of faulty. Because people are still keeping jobs. Okay,
you could argue that cars invented an entire new industry. It invented hotels, it invented drive-thrus, and that created more jobs in perpetuity. But now you have technology that is taking away these jobs, essentially taking away industries and replacing them with robots, not humans.
Sure, but again, I think the argument still stands that you've had technology destroying entire industries throughout history, and now poor people can wash their clothes. I think that's kind of just to go segueing into the second point, that I don't like inequality, but I would much rather have the bottom 1% be able to wash their clothes and everyone struggling to find medicine for their babies. I would much rather have the exponential gaps, as long as those people who need help are actually being able to survive, as long as they're actually able to provide for their families, and as long as their quality of life is being supported. And so I think that's why I specifically talked about the quality of life. I think it's more important that the poor people have better lives if we had to choose, right? If we had to choose equality or quality of life, if we had to choose everyone being equal and everyone suffering, or huge amounts of inequality, but those at the bottom being able to actually have better lives, I think that that's what the debate actually is. Because that's kind of the binary that the Ford team is kind of boxing us into. That there's a bunch of inequality, but the people at the bottom are able to have medicine for their babies and be able to do something as simple as wash the clothes they weren't able to do 50 years ago.
And Alex, we'll give you 2 minutes to finish up, and then we'll go to questions to the audience.
Sure. America has just over 300 million people. There's more than 7 billion people in the world. The technology that we're talking about putting in the hands of people the ability to diagnose Zika and Ebola to prevent outbreak. By the way, do you know the reason why one person comes here and has Ebola and there's no outbreak, and one person has it in Liberia and it rapidly expands? The reason is because they have no information network. They have no information network. They have no ability to diagnose. They have no ability to treat. And the applications that you're talking about in terms of treating disease, you're talking about the ability to hook up an IV or a needle otherwise into a smartphone. I mean this is a real thing. And to be able to diagnose people with Zika and with Ebola, and to shuffle them into a place where they can be treated, and then where they can be triaged without some sort of disaster occurring. And you don't want to do that? By the way, you're talking about Walmart. Walmart doesn't have an online presence? Is the majority of Walmart's business not online now? Do you know about the competition between Walmart and Amazon? I mean, realistically, and if we're talking about consolidation economically, Walmart is one of the largest grain providers to people in poverty in the entire world. And we're talking about being able to distribute pesticides via drone. We're talking about being able to avoid malaria. And you bring up pittances, like the inequality in America, please.
Pittances, that is a hostile word, sir. All right, we're going to open it up to question from the audience. I'll let you guys bring that up in your closing remarks. Let's bring it back here.
So, quick question. Putting the doomsday issue aside, do you see, this is posed towards your side, Alex, I guess. Putting the doomsday issue aside, do you see artificial intelligence causing a threat because it makes us too efficient in only one area? And what I mean by that is, the Earth is only so big. What if artificial intelligence drastically improves the medical field and life expectancy, but struggles to create a solution to the overpopulation issue and struggle to advance agriculture. So if you can live longer, but AI leads to famine, is that still a benefit to human existence?
So again, we've had all these issues come up over and over again about people have been talking about overpopulation famine for like hundreds of years, and actually when you actually get so efficient that you no longer have to have babies to work on your farms, people have less babies. So it's not like the U.S. actually right now, Japan is actually experiencing this. They aren't having babies, and so they have no problem with having to. They're still making technological advances, still improving, but their population has actually become stable. They're so economically efficient that they no longer, 100 years ago, you had to have a farm, so you had to, have like 7 kids at least to be able to work that. Like that's why we have such, why we had to make the population so huge. In America, it's the same thing. We're becoming so technologically advanced, and when you look at the population increase, the ratio between, as far as people having kids is actually starting to level out. So in 50 years, we're actually going to have probably less people in America than we do now. So that's not a concern because it's almost inherent that an increase in technology, an increase in efficiency will actually decrease the need to be able to increase population. So I hope that it kind of answers that side of things. And also, thanks to Elon Musk, hopefully he's going to put up into space and not the planets. But I think those two things, both with technological increase, inherently decrease the need to continue to populate the Earth. And we see that actually has a negative effect on that sort of thing.
Sure. So I do want to follow up something Alex said a minute ago about Walmart doing exceedingly well because of some of these technological advancements.
Bring it back to penises. All right.
I think there's no doubt that that's true. The problem is Walmart's owned by the Walton family, which is one of the richest families in this world. In fact, they own almost as much wealth as 25% of the global population. So I don't know how much Walmart doing well helps the middle class in this country, which is only continuing to shrink. So another point, Iain talked about people at top doing great, but AI somehow helping everyone. I don't know why we would be expected to believe that people at the bottom of this country are ever going to be able to afford any types of these artificial intelligence. And maybe there's the pipe dream that entrepreneurs can start some AI startup and somehow make it. The reality, if you look at what's happening in Silicon Valley, is Google and Facebook. These major corporations are monopolizing the industry. They're buying up every single AI startup. The competition for AI job placement. It's Forrester, so this is actually an argument for their side. Forrester came out and they said, guys, the news isn't all bad. AI is actually going to create 15 million jobs in the next 10 years. Well, it doesn't exactly matter if 30 million will be created over the next 20 years if we're losing 150, right? That's a net loss of 120 million jobs. And going back to the idea that we're going to have to retrain these people, the US is spending less than 1% of its GDP on job training and retraining program, which is woefully inadequate on every level. In fact, if you look at Denmark, Denmark is outspending us by 18 times. France is outspending us by 12 times. Germany is outspending us by 7 times. So the US isn't going to be able to save itself overnight when this change happens overnight. The other thing I want to mention is that you talked about saving lives, curing diseases like Zika. Sure, that's possible and that's beautiful, and that's why we do have to pursue artificial intelligence. But this motion is not, does artificial intelligence offer benefits to the future of human existence? We can't separate the threats from the benefits. Will AI advance our lives in certain ways? Yes. But does it inevitably also threaten them in terms of job loss, and also the idea that these machines can go amok or be overridden by totalitarian governments, by terrorist organizations? Those are threats that we just can't deny, no matter how strong the positives are.
All right, let's get another question in. Sir, over here on couch.
Hi, my name is Greg. So certainly I see that the technology improves a lot of things in the near future. And if you look at the whole world rather than the United States, it benefits the world at this point because more people get jobs. I mean, developed countries suffer in emerging economies, but more people get employed, people get out of poverty, so there is a benefit of it.
Greg, I love your contribution. Do you have a question?
Yeah, the question is really about evolution. We know about human evolution, but which has not been mathematically described. My question is, how do you know how this evolution will manifest itself in artificial intelligence?
And Alex, you want to go? Sure.
I think it's an excellent question. It's hard to say because there's phenotypical and there's genotypical evolution. And so, for instance, if you've ever seen the movie WALL-E, right? And it's probably what comes to everybody's mind. The idea that everyone's going to get fat as shit and then be, like, lolling around on some hoverboard drinking 32 ounces from 7-Eleven seems somewhat logical given the upward slope of the obesity epidemic. But the issue is that to embed an evolutionary trait takes centuries, indeed millennia of constant exposure to the outside influence. And to go beyond the phenotypical, so let's say on other continents, there are people who have features that suit them to be in the tundra, right? And that's over the course of millennia. So the question in terms of artificial intelligence, giving you an intellectually honest answer, is very hard to answer because you're talking about the last 20 years. And you're asking me to extrapolate and say, well, what's it going to be like? And I'd have to say to you, you know what? Given the history of the entire world and the history of everyone predicting everything ever and being completely wrong, I'm going to give you a prediction otherwise.
I think that's a pretty concisely good answer.
Accelerated?
We'll get back to that. I want to get a couple more questions in here. Starting back here.
I just wanted to do a few corrections before I go on.
Quick corrections, please.
You said Elon Musk is like trying to warn us about everything, but yet I see Elon Musk developing new AI every single day. Just the other day I saw him create doing sumo wrestling. And another thing about Elon Musk, he created the Go game. You said he's developed. Other than that, he does now Dota 2, the game Dota 2. This way more advanced. He's been doing that, and they've been beating the best players. So my question is, the real question is, should we go forward with AI, right? So what I was thinking was that, what is our purpose of our life? Fulfilling our true potential. Okay, so the pros and cons, what I heard from you say was the cons was jobs and war, while on the cons was jobs and war. And the pros I heard, health, ease of life, future survival, improving lives. So here's what I think, right? Fulfilling our full potential. So what if AI is our way of survival? What if AI is our salvation? That the future of our species is through AI. At some point, we become extinct and our legacy is AI. And then we hand over this earth to AI.
Thank you.
Yeah, so those are all great questions. So the first thing was about Elon Musk. So he's absolutely right. Elon Musk actually created a company called OpenAI. It's actually more of a project, it's not profit. And the idea of OpenAI is to create sustainable, safe AI. Because the reality is, you're absolutely right. The reality is we can't reverse this trend, just like we couldn't reverse the trend of technology. But what's happening is this thing can run out of control so fast. And so people like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawkins know that while we do have to continue to develop it because there's no other way to do it, we have to put in guidelines and put in regulations in place. For example, the premise that artificial intelligence, especially artificial general intelligence, could have adversary interests. Even if its interests diverge from our own the slightest bit, just like ours did from our other ancestors, we could be pit against them. We could be a threat, or we could be disregarded altogether. So think about humans' relationship with ants. We don't hate ants. In fact, a lot of us would probably step over them if we're walking the sidewalk. But the second the presence of ants conflicts with our interests, like we're building a house and there's an anthill there, we're having a picnic and there are ants on the blanket, we're going to totally disregard them. So the fear, really, when it comes to automated weapons, autonomous weapons, is that these things could develop just the slightest different interest, and that alone could be enough to threaten our existence, our well-being. And now, another thing that was mentioned about the evolution of...
Brian, you mind if I just keep it there for now?
Sure.
Joel, do you want to add a comment or two?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this because again, as my colleague mentioned, this thing could spiral completely out of control. My opponents have given certain examples of medical use or the DNA. Oh, it's just like DNA. That didn't spiral out of control. This won't spiral out of control. But I stress the point that this is something completely different and that will have the potential of spiraling out of control for the simple fact, again, I stress, my colleague mentions, this thing is an independent thinking thing that could potentially develop its own goals separate from our goals. He made the example of the ant, and I guess I wanted to reference the World Economic Forum held in Davos, Switzerland, and a group of experts were talking about how the laws, the lethal autonomous weaponry can and will, should be regulated before this arms race happens, because this is a completely dangerous thing that could, spiral out of control. Again, because for a specific example is imagining, we sent, some of these troops, units of these robots out to go fight a certain battle, and they're searching for their target. How they get to that target, what will they do, and disregard civilians to go get their target, that can't exactly be
that's
controlled.
interesting. I heard the story about the machine that has to make paper clips, but they'll do it at all costs. They'll extract resources from your own house if it was designed to, So, all right, let's get one more question, preferably from somebody of the opposite gender. Yes?
Okay, so I guess this is for you guys. So why would artificial intelligence, which ultimately becomes an independent actor, choose to be a moral actor when morality also comes into conflict with self-interest and logic? Especially if we talk about moving past this reptilian brain, why wouldn't AI basically get rid of what are, at its base level, chemical emotions like kindness or charity?
Great question. Because morality requires programming. The entire idea behind human beings creating moral systems is that they've cultivated them over time, and they've developed them, and you can choose your genesis story, you can choose your origin story, but artificial intelligence is stripped of that. They're given prerogatives, and they're given programming controls, and that's essentially how they work. And, if the moral prerogatives of a certain system can be programmed into artificial intelligence, they will be. If they can't be, they won't be. And this is the prime issue, for instance, with drones, for instance, with any other technology that's non-human, that's used as a replacement for human beings in the military. It's whether they can make the mercy judgment. This is essentially what it's referred to. Right? So you're in the middle of a firefight, you're in Basra, you're overtaking the port of Basra, you're retaking it from ISIS or whoever else has been in control lately. I mean, if anyone can follow the chronology, you're free to inform me on it, but someone is there, they're the last person, they're the radical, they throw up their hands, they put their hands in the air, and this person's a devastating killer, and they're known as the leader of the opposition. Mercy is embedded in human beings, and unless it's programmatically inserted into the code for artificial intelligence, it will or won't be used. So the answer at the end is actually that it's irrelevant, because they can't cultivate it on their own.
And that's essentially the plot of iRobot. So if anybody wants to go check that out, that's...
Don't
all right,
check,
one
don't
last
check
question.
it out.
So it is an important thing to know that AI does have to be programmed, and a concern that comes to mind is who is doing the programming, who's in positions of power, who has the privilege to be able to create the code that will feed into AI. So how do we mitigate the potential for AI to simply further entrench current inequalities, white supremacy, patriarchy that we see in this world?
Patriarchy being the key word in that question. Who would like to say it?
I think that's a really, really important question, especially in this political climate, not just here in the US, but globally, as we see sort of the rise, no doubt, of totalitarian regimes. I mean, what artificial intelligence is, in its essence, is the groundwork, the infrastructure necessary for a totalitarian surveillance state. Facebook AI, facial recognition software, the ability for me to look at my phone or my computer and the people running the platforms behind that computer to know exactly who I am, to know the types of ads I'm most likely to click on, the type of personalized content that most appeals to me. I mean, this is dangerous stuff in the private sector, but it's much more dangerous if and when it's controlled by, a government or, God forbid, a terrorist organization. So I don't think you can control where this goes. And that's what this is all about. And I want to keep this laser focused on the motion here. Because the question isn't, does AI offer benefits and threats? The motion is, does it pose a serious threat? And my opponents over here, our opponents have not been able to argue that this doesn't pose serious threats. You see the whole jobs argument, which is the crux of our argument, was largely ignored. I mean, you can say that robots won't take over the world and kill us, sure, but what are you going to do with those 150 million people right here, not to mention the rest of the world?
And wait. We're gonna hold off on questions here. Did you guys want to refute that, or did you want to go straight to closing arguments?
I would like to refute that before we go to closing arguments. So the principle of the argument, I think, is largely missed by the opposition because they're saying these jobs are going to be destroyed. If I'm understanding correctly, these people are going to be displaced. And we're saying that that's true, but that's been happening for thousands of years of jobs being destroyed in the place of technological advances. So I honestly don't think that's really like an important argument in this because, like I talked about, people are still getting jobs with huge technological advancements. So I think that's just from the data is just not true. As much as Amazon's been given, millions of jobs have been destroyed in just the last 10, 20 years, and you don't see human existence, about to collapse. Secondly, I think a big important part that I want to address about, being able to protect against the foes, people who are abusing AI, I think is a very important argument also. I think the fact that you have people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk literally creating divisions and nonprofits to be able to create a defense, I think is a good sign. Again, we're talking about the future, right? Is we have our greatest minds working on it already to figure out a solution. We have people working on a solution. I think the scary part would be if we didn't have anyone working on it. If we had the data that said this is going to destroy humanity, and Elon Musk just kind of shrugged his shoulders and was like, I don't know, I just want to build electric cars. Like, that'd be a big problem, but he's not doing that. Some of the greatest people over the globe are actually trying to combat this, which I think is really important. So I think, again, just those two things before we go to closing arguments.
All right, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to close our crossfire section of the debate. We will move into closing arguments, starting with the against side. So which of you gentlemen would like to go first? Yeah? All right, starting off that.
All right. Anthony, will you hold my pen?
I will.
I only trust you. It is fascinating to me. Brian is my first impression of you was excellent. I may have changed my mind. Just kidding. It's fascinating to me about the emphasis on employment because I don't recall actually any empirical support for your proposition that AI is going to harm employment. And I'll tell you, the course of technological progress has indeed ensured that some sort of job has arisen, and indeed multiples of that job have arisen in the end. Artisans were replaced after the Industrial Revolution. The loom came into play. You needed new weavers. You needed transporters. The Gutenberg press was created. You needed booksellers. And this has been the course throughout the history of technological progress. And I'm curious why exactly there'd be a deviation now. And we're talking about the motion, artificial intelligence poses a serious threat to the future of human existence. Well, it's sort of a barrier between the yes and the no, isn't it? Because if you're saying, well, artificial intelligence does all these great things. I mean, shoot, it can feed 3, 4, 5 billion people. It can provide medicine to them too. But, 150 years from now, they might rise up. Drones, matrix lights, the whole of them, robots with mechanical arms and machinery, and they might come down and sweep and annihilate us. What exactly is the evidentiary basis for that? And when we're talking about something that's grounded in fact, grounded in empirical fact that's able to be assessed now, and something that's sort of speculative, something far off in the future. And I would say this. There's a lot of focus on the sort of aggressive elements, the contentious elements, the conflict elements of what artificial intelligence might present. Militarily, what's conflict going to be like? Are there going to be robotic soldiers? But the truth is, right now,
right now, at this very moment, in the world that we live in, we are accelerating the process of healing people medicinally. We're giving people access to a network of medicine, of nutrition. We are alleviating hunger in a way that is unprecedented because of these technological networks. And essentially, if you want to agree with the other side's view of this proposition, you have to say that all that is not worth it because someday, somehow, maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger might show up.
And with that, thank you so much. Moving on to the other side.
So I just want to be really honest here because this is a serious issue. This isn't just a topic for debate. This is going to continue after tonight. And so what Alex said, while I respect it, it's antithetical to reality that we're not seeing job loss, and we're seeing it right now. When Facebook acquired Instagram had 13 employees. You know one of the companies that Instagram put out of business? Kodak. They had 145,000 employees. So the direction that the world is going in, software is taking our jobs. I worked in advertising. One of my biggest jobs was to implement ad tech platforms, whether they're CRM or CMS or e-com platforms. These, by nature, automate manual marketing labor so that these agencies and brands can lay off their employees and see their bottom line improve. So this is just the way the world is going. There's no arguing that. Now, I get the argument that we're not there yet. It's going to take time. When can these jobs really do everything that we can do, right? It seems far off. And that goes back to what we were talking about between weak AI and strong AI. So that narrow AI today that can just play chess better than us, in the future will be able to do everything better than us. And there are only two basic facts you have to accept in order to get on this train. The first is that we're going to continue to make advancements in terms of hardware and software development. I would like to ask Iain in his closing statement if he could refute that we're going to continue to make that investment unless some other catastrophe stops us. Maybe we nuke ourselves before we get there. But barring some unforeseen catastrophe like that, what's to stop humans from making our machines faster and smarter? And then the second proposition you have to accept if you want to support this motion and say that artificial intelligence does pose a serious threat to human existence, it's that there's nothing special, unfortunately, about this wetware that's working inside all of our heads. Different materials. In fact, because we're made out of biochemical materials with size limitations to our brains, we're at a major disadvantage. And I know this is like a human narcissistic thing that because we're at the top of the food chain, we like to think that we're at the top of like the evolutionary scale and that intelligence just doesn't go any further. But the reality is we're already seeing intelligence catch up to us within specific domains. So once it's cross-domain, it's inevitable that it'll catch up and supersede us. So this really, I mean this honestly, this isn't a trend, it's not a theory, it's not a hunch. This is something that's happening. And the question is, what do we do about it? So there was a question earlier, I think one of the most important questions, do we pursue AI or not? And I'm not here today to say that we shouldn't pursue AI. In fact, I think the only thing scarier than pursuing it is not pursuing it. Because we need the solutions to cancer and to climate change and things we can't solve in here. The reality is, though, these also offer serious threats that we haven't faced yet before. And if we are going to regulate them, and we are going to do what Elon Musk is doing and create safe AI, first we have to acknowledge the threat and then act accordingly. It's not about disregarding it, pretending it doesn't exist. They agree that we should regulate these things, but before we can regulate, we need to get serious and recognize the serious threat. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, I love Blade Runner 2049. I think it's also, honestly, this is a plug for it. I have no economic interest in this, but it's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. But, I mean, as Evan talked about in his introduction, talking about this topic, there's no scientific evidence, really, that AI is going to be able to 100% replicate the human brain. So I just want to kind of throw that out, that there's really no scientific evidence. We agree that there are things that are present. We do agree that there are things that Brian said that are valid. But I want to point out that the fact that the reason why we don't think that there is a serious threat right now to the future of human existence is because people are recognizing that this is something we need to talk about. This is something we have to find solutions for. Just because there are harms to something that we need to try and avoid doesn't mean it's actually going to destroy us all. The very fact that Brian's here, God bless him, and people like him who are scared of this means that there are going to be people who are going to be able to fight against the harms. So that, again, the debate is not, are there things we should be worried about? Does it right now pose a serious threat to the future of human existence? If there are all of these defense right now that Elon Musk is doing, that Bill Gates is warning us about, that that lay people are actually worried about, then if that's just right now, then imagine in a few years the kind of defenses that we can come about. We talked about before, I mean, the audience recognizes that this is something that is by design. If we design these things, if we invest in technology into be able to combat the harms, then this is something that will actually be able to make sure that this is not actually a serious threat to the future of human existence. Because again, the future of human existence, that's a pretty weighty topic, that's pretty deep. And so I think we need to consider that as much as there are these, these doomsday thoughts that the affirmative team is trying to throw up, the fact that we are worried about specific harms doesn't mean that AI is going to destroy us. Just because there are specific capabilities that are bad doesn't mean that it does pose a serious threat. So I think that terminology is very important. It's not are there harms, because we agree there are definitely harms to AI and definitely things we need to be worried about. But right now, maybe 50 years ago, the people not knowing what AI is, maybe there was a serious threat to human existence. But we are already solving these things. We are already trying to make safe AI. Elon Musk is one of the most influential tech people in the world. The fact that he's doing this has a ripple effect, and besides just his own. And so I think that, talking about that, I think that alone warrants a negative ballot because there already is articles put up against this. But last note about the jobs thing, I think there's a huge misconception about nominal versus real job loss or gain. Again, they keep saying that there are all these jobs lost, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics themselves, these statistical organizations say that there are going to be millions of jobs also created for this. And again, as we've talked about, since the end of the Great Recession, when we've had huge technological gains, this is really boring, but the employment population ratio is still the same. People are still getting jobs, people are still able to do it. Just because the firms you can't point it out doesn't mean it's not happening, and that's why we need to make sure we vote against the resolution.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Okay, my opponents at the beginning of this debate, if you can remember, cried out economic history. They have made this point that, oh yes, in the past we have lost jobs, new technologies have destroyed jobs, but in their place new jobs were created, and this makes everything nice, this makes the world a better place. And that is true, but this is completely different, and we have talked about how this is different. And let's ask ourselves some important questions to see how this is different. Will we own these beings? If they're self-aware, if they're able to think, will we own them, or will they own themselves? What happens when machines become more competent in all physical and mental labor? Where is the economic logic in hiring someone, a worker, who is less competent over someone who is more competent? If a machine becomes more competent in both regards, then there is no place, there is no function for us in this future. And this is why this poses a threat, a serious threat to our existence or our way of life, our way of functioning as a society. What would this society even look like? Some people, my opponents mentioned Wall-E as an example, but I don't see an alternative. In Star Wars even, they don't have this kind of system, but let's not get into that. And let's ask ourselves this next important question. Can we contain this? Is this thing going to be like a person? It is self-learning. Me and my colleague have stressed this. This is a self-learning system, and its main goal is to get bigger, learn more, get information, be able to talk to us better. And the specific example is the AI system put out in Twitter. And it's a basic AI system that would learn, to function through interactions with humans, and it would keep on learning, and that's what its purpose. And if this is the purpose of the AI system, to keep on learning, to understand things more, can we stop this? And someone in the crowd asked a question regarding to power dynamics and who's going to write the code for this AI system and how will that play out to serve that institution. But I asked the question, can we prevent this AI system from writing its own code? can it develop itself without our input? And what will happen then? This is why this is a serious threat that can harm us. I've listed out the different ways that this can harm out before through the new ways of cyber warfare that is a serious threat. And we aren't taking this threat seriously in the Pentagon. There are 5 branches of the military, the Navy, the Air Force, but cyber warfare is not one. And that talks about how seriously we take this. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause for our incredible debaters. My heart is racing. That was awesome. All right, so you guys all have your second ballots. If you don't mind filling those out for me right now, Thomas is going to walk around and collect those. We're going to tally up the results. Whoever earned the most votes will be deemed our winner for this evening. And while we're doing all of that, I just wanted to stress to you guys that this program is my passion. I hope that you guys really enjoy this constructive discourse. I mean, this is talking and listening at its finest. It's respectful and it's engaging in really topical issues, and we want to keep it going and keep it growing. So, as far as we know, there are no other organizations besides the Motion that is teaching these values of debate to individuals who no longer have access to high school or collegiate programs. And that's ridiculous. Why is there nothing available to help us continue these conversations as we reach adulthood for those of us who never had the opportunity or the desire to debate in high school? So this is for you guys. We want to make this a collaborative effort. We want to scale it. We want to be a part of the WeWork alternative curriculum program where we're getting this in every single WeWork across the globe, people talking about these issues and then learning how to actually speak about these issues even better through our master class. So if you guys are again interested in our master class on November 8th, we only have 5 spots left. Again, you have codes on your worksheets that will help you, so you guys can see yourself up here. Please sign up for that. Another one is on December 7th. If you want a $10 off discount code, please fill out the feedback forms, give them to me, and I'll give you the slip that has the code on there. And one thing that we did last month that went really, really well was we did a poll of prospective topics that we're going to do for next month. So we're going to do that right now. I have 3 topic selections, and I want you guys to just raise your hand if it's something that you would actually come to a debate to see. And please be honest, otherwise we're going to do it, and then you were lying. So, all right. The first topic, and we'll do each one and just raise your hand if it's something you actually want to talk about, is, sorry? Do you want to be able to small first, so that people prefer that? Yeah. Okay. The list is illegal drugs, voting, the process of voting rights, we'll figure it out, or universal basic income. So, let's start with the first, illegal drugs. You can raise your hand multiple times if you like. Illegal drugs, okay. How about voting? Okay. And lastly, universal basic income. Interesting. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. So we're going to get all these results. Does anybody have any ballots left? Any remaining ballots? All right, so if you guys want to stick around and hear the results, we encourage you to stick around, ask me any questions you need to, grab another beer if you like, and we'll be back shortly in just a couple minutes. Thank you so much.